Good evening, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the Speakers Gallery. Our guest today is Professor Mugambi.
Yes.
Professor Mugambi is a lecturer in development communications at the University of Nairobi. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mugambi.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa.
For the interest of fellow Kenyans, particularly young men and women who are going through university education,
Yes.
give a brief history of your own background, where you went to school, when you went to school, and what you're doing right now.
Thank
Development communication is clearly something you need to give a small definition to.
Thank you. My name is Hezron Mugambi. I'm an associate professor of development communication at the University of Nairobi. Development communication is associated with how development matters are communicated to the public. As we continue, health, education, and all issues related to development must be measured, monitored, expressed, perceived. So, development communication is about communicating all development activities as they happen or as they should happen in communities, in societies, in countries. I have been teaching at the University of Nairobi for the last 15 years, having been a high school teacher at Lenana School for 6 years before then. Before that, I had my master's degree in communication from the University of Nairobi and an undergraduate degree in education at the same university. I was a student at Litein High School in Kericho County, having been in the same county for my primary school education. And thereafter, I went for my doctoral studies at the University of Southern Illinois University, Carbondale in the US. Thereafter, in 2011, I rejoined the University of Nairobi after study leave, where I have been since then, participating in teaching for undergraduate and postgraduate, and of course research work. I have worked for government agencies, non-government organizations, and also for international organizations like the World Bank, where I've consulted, the African Union, and other agencies.
Very well put. Do you think the communication of development in Kenya is being handled the way it should be professionally handled for the ordinary Wanjiku in this country, or the ordinary Mohammed, the ordinary Uyugi, to understand it and comprehend it in a sense in which he or she can make an informed choices to see the differences between one policy against the other and one development program as opposed to another one?
There is a big problem when it comes to development communication, yes, and the way communication activities are communicated to the publics. It is a two-way challenge. First of all, I think the media has failed in the way it reports development activities within our border and elsewhere. It is a bigger challenge, it's a global challenge. But it's upon our media to be more sensitive to what is happening. More often than not in the country, we focus more on politics. The more the rhetorics, sensationalism. Yes. The more the rhetorics, the more the reportage. So you find that a very important dam has been constructed in Wajir, in Kitui, wherever it is not given prominence. It is not reported, and how that dam is going to be of importance to those people in the local area and generally in the country. So there is a bigger problem. Again, the problem also relates to training. Not many journalists have been trained in development communication reportage. And more often than not, because it's a bit challenging, more of our journalists would like to be trained in media studies where they just report what is happening
Stories.
in politics. Just stories. He said,
She said.
he argued, and all that. So, because more often than not, development communication is about analysis, putting context into stories, and interpreting them for the general public to understand that this project, that project will be important. If we run a railway from here to Uganda, this is the kind of data we are projecting, the kind of people who will travel on this, how many years that will take. So it's a projection.
The goods.
It's the goods, the people, and all that, the services, how that is going to help.
For example, we don't know, we put in the SGR right now in place.
Yes.
We don't know one train, how many, if you ask any ordinary Kenyan, if you ask me, who's a politician, how many containers it can carry on a single trip, I'll be lost.
And even
and it's important to understand how many containers that thing carries, how long it takes to deliver from Mombasa to the final destination, which is still inland, and what is again the cost of transshipment of that from the railway to trucks, because this railway does not go all the way to Uganda. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And whether there's any economic sense in what we have done, and whether the investments into this justifies the returns.
That is now exactly what a development communication communicator or journalist is supposed to do. To tell Kenyans, for example, in the last 1 year, the number of trips made, the cargo carried, the number of passengers, and all those activities, and how they impacted on the economy, not of only the country, but the various destinations.
Turnaround
and
time, hours
and
gained,
all those.
yes.
That is generally all the information packaged as development is what we are supposed to get. So you can see it will really take time for a journalist who is trying to develop
that economic sense to begin with, first of all, development sense.
And then to put all that data, and not only to put it together and tell Kenyans, but to interpret what it means for the economy, for the social well-being, for the political well-being of the country, even vis-a-vis our neighbors. So it is a real challenging thing. So there is a challenge we have in terms of communicating development, activities in our country. The President Moi focused on an individual Kenyan more than anyone else.
One individual
Kenyan.
Okay.
He did not look at Kenyans in the sense of the global. He looked at an individual Kenyan. How did he do that? He focused on very many policies which ensured that the Kenyan is touched by his leadership wherever they are. And in many aspects, I'll just touch one or two of them. Look at the education sector.
He expanded it.
He exponentially expanded the education sector as to ensure that as many students as possible enrolled in primary schools in Kenya. And that the transition rate between primary school and secondary school grew in bounds.
Leaps and bounds. And
the transition between secondary school to university was over 150%. If you look at 1978 and 2002, and we look at transition rates between primary school and secondary school, and now the university system where he had already changed to 844 system, you see a huge transformation of opportunities for young Kenyans. In fact, now when people talk about the certificates and degrees and technical skills which Kenyans got, we can only look back and think about the transformations which were brought by President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. That is just in the education sector. If you look at the number of students who came especially from marginalized, the so-called marginalized communities, okay, you see huge numbers. And those who are disadvantaged or marginalized communities, you see people from the northern Kenya, you see people from the coast, you see people from those so-called marginalized areas,
Upper Rift Valley,
the Njemps, the Tugans, where he came from.
Marakwet.
The Marakwet, the Pokots, the Turkana. So for the first time, those people after he took over in 10 years, they were celebrating having engineers who they have never had.
Doctors
who they had never had. Pilots who they have, courtesy of the President Moi. So that is in the education sector. Number two, within the education sector, he started affirmative action. And this affirmative action was not only for the marginalized, but it was for the girl child. So for him, girl child empowerment was at the forefront. Not only in the political arena or elsewhere, but in education, because he had this realization that you can only have a lady, a girl, high in the civil service, within the public service, who is educated. So what do? You subsidize this, you introduce cut-off points for girls from those areas. So we now had girls from northern Kenya, we had girls from coast, we had girls from all those marginalized coming to university to study even what was not, they were not able to study at that time, medicine, engineering, all those opportunities, law and all that. Yes. And that ensured that then they will come to the senior positions within government and be able to serve not only Kenya, but their communities where they came from. So that was a big win. And that is within education. And also they were able to produce professors. They were able to produce other experts and even export within the region. So, and that was the contribution of the president. Now, when you come to other social sectors, within development practice, he introduced what we used to call, I don't know whether you remember, district focus for rural development.
Yes.
Now, district focus for rural development focused, and I said before, on the individual. You know, now we have the counties, and people will think that the counties, in terms of philosophy and communication practice or development practice, just started the other day. President Moi had started the district focus for rural development, where development was initiated and the Center for Development was at the district as of that time. And if you remember very well, even our counties were just based on those districts.
Yes.
So really, when we are talking about counties and them being the focus of development, then these counties, the former president had already seen this as a devolution concept of taking, leadership and development really to the people. So he started this, and when this was started, it benefited Kenyans in very many ways. One of those things, as a young man, I saw, which I have never seen before, is the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector got a boom through the district focus for rural development. And more than ever before, I have never seen many extension workers in the rural areas.
Technical assistance.
Yes, to the farmers and farming communities. That is the time when you had the farmers training. I don't know whether you remember. Farmers training centers strewn all over the country. And they were almost in every other center or every other district. And farmers really benefited from technical expertise of training in these centers and getting extension services at their homes. So this was another plus. The former president also, through KANU, started a social movement. And the social movement was known as KANU Maendeleo ya Wanawake. You know, we might see it, Speaker, as something which was very small. This was a social movement to emancipate and move women towards, leadership positions, towards educating them, towards participation in the electoral process and in the political processes of the country. If you ask me where that went, it is slowly, we have slowly moved away from those things, and now the emancipation and the involvement of women within politics is a matter of debate. We talk about it in terms of, the other day we've been trying to have the 2/3 gender rule. I don't know where it is. It is no longer in practice, and yet it's a constitutional requirement. But the president thought in his own wisdom that the only way you emancipate and ensure women are involved from the grassroots to the national level is to have a wing within the political party called
create the awareness,
to create the awareness
to
from the
educate
villages,
them, to get the
to
girl
move
child.
and the girl child and their involvement up to the national level. And that is something which I have been meeting women leaders, and they have been saying this was a plus, and we are missing this kind of wing, either within the government or within the political movement we have, which can emancipate, educate people from the villages up to the national level. So really, those are two things within the political economy of the country and the social movements which the president started within the education sector and within development of the nation, which I can identify quickly as those which I saw. Of course, I cannot forget what I took in school, otherwise known as the milk program. You know what they.
You were a beneficiary of that.
Yes, I was a beneficiary of the Nyayo milk, and this Nyayo milk is like what we have. Sometimes we have sporadically happening within the ASAL areas, the school feeding program.
Yes.
And you know the school feeding program
started with him.
Yes, started with him, which was supposed to help. You know
what you call nomadic children.
Nomadic children.
Yes.
To attend school.
To attend
it was an
school
incentive.
because if they get one square meal in a day and they get some little bit of a milk,
they are good.
Good to go.
Yes. So this increased access and retention within the school system, which of course had all the benefits.
He expanded on high school, secondary education,
school, and which also moved. You remember even the Higher Education Loans Board.
Yes.
The way it started during his time, and it was supposed to help students from poor backgrounds to access university education without necessarily feeling disadvantaged. So within the education sector, the former president really did a lot. And within the social sectors, as I've just given
he united the country.
Completely.
He did not have a very narrow focus. For example, I remember very well, as a young child, we would be brought all the way from Garissa to come and entertain our first president
right here.
in Gatundu.
Yes.
You people did not have to go through that.
Yes. No. We didn't.
And we, those children, those young children, primary school kids, will be out there literally shouting themselves.
Yeah.
Thirsty and hungry and the rest of it.
Yeah.
We never used to get anything. You don't get drinks, you don't get a meal.
For that,
You don't get any, you forget about the adults who came there to entertain the first head of state in the country. But those children would leave that place very hungry. And in the evening is the only time when they have an opportunity to be given to eat something, if the headmasters and the school administration had done that kind of a preparation. Exit Kenyatta, enter Moi. And then what do we have? Feastings. Literally, everybody who comes
will feast
in that place.
Yes, and that was not only a feasting at home.
Yes.
It will be feasting literally everywhere.
Yes, and okay, at that time many of us would much later look at it and say, no, this is some kind of creating a patronage and Harambe and all these things should be abolished, which we managed finally to have it completely in law.
And
the rest of it, so much now a public officer is not allowed to come and officiate of a Harambe. But the Harambe was by and large, forget about the political aspect of it and how people, steal money from the treasury in the country and then try and build following and support by using the same money in churches and everywhere, which of course is the later debate and narrative in that.
Yes.
But the reality of the matter is that many young men and women went to Harambe schools, secondary schools, were educated through that Harambe secondary schools. Many were contributing to, including the former head of states, including the GOT, what you call auctions and the rest of it. And
yes.
I mean, there was a sense that we can use that word, the Harambe concept itself, which is pulled together in many aspects of of the social life of Kenyans, whether it is fighting the soil erosion through the Momonyoko ya Udongo. You remember the late former Omamo saying that Nyoko ya Udongo. And you would see our former head of state. It was very healthy, very, very healthy indeed in that, those days. Would lift some rocks and create all those, gabions that used to be created to stop the soil erosion and the rest of it. So national development itself was a movement, was a national movement. It might have had its own imperfections in many ways. It might have not tamed corruption that well. But there was a sense of commonality, a sense of the government in unison and in unity, moving in a direction. And then he created a school, Kabarak High School, and started picking young boys and girls,
taking them there
from very poor backgrounds in all over the country. And those eventually became the base, the foundation for that informed population in every small community, whether you are in James or you are Ogiek, or you are Somali from the north, who when he's coming to Nairobi used to say, I'm going to Kenya, or a Turkana. The only Harambee that our first head of state used to promote is the Gatundu Self-Help Hospital. I don't even remember that.
We had that as a young
so much money was taken from all over the country. I would have expected that Gatundu today to be something similar to Mayo Clinic in Rochester in the US. You know what I mean? But very narrow in the sense that this is his own home ground, the head of state's home ground. It's not the rest of the country. So he unified the country. He unified the country, as you put it.
Actually, through all these activities, he was moving, and that's why I was saying he focused on an individual. Yet he was working on an individual to feel part of the country. He looked even at individuals, and that's why I've talked about Kanu Maendeleo Wanawake. You see, he will use that wing to mobilize all women towards feeling of national unity, nationhood, and togetherness.
Parastatals, you look at parastatals those days, and you see the face of Kenya. No community used to have more than one or two, in very extreme cases, two members. But today you will find a parastatal composed on only two communities.
Perhaps with just one name, which you can differentiate. But that is exactly what he did, and I think he's a leader you can say he focused on the people. He focused on an individual Kenyan to ensure that he felt he was part of the system. He felt like a Kenyan. And that feeling was in fighting soil erosion through Momonyoko wa Udongo program, promoting education, promoting gender inclusivity. Not only imaginary school, gender. Those days when gender issues were really...
gender development.
So
when I first came to Parliament, I remember that famous Beijing women...
the declaration.
Conference.
Conference in Beijing.
When Niva Mwendwa, who was a minister at that time, in the 7th Parliament, led the Kenyan delegation. And there were women from all over. There were women from Garissa who had never traveled. This was the first time they're traveling out of the country.
And they went to Beijing.
And they went and they came back literally informed and very different. I mean, in later years, they were traveling to all over the world.
If you look at those women who belong to Kanu Maendeleo Wanawake organization and its leadership, they were actually the later MPs and politicians who we had. And most of these ones we have even now must have gained a lot from those movements. And so his contribution is really far and wide. You cannot really sectionalize and say, this is what he did. The only thing he did for a Kenyan. And his rallying call of forest cover, ukikata moja, 10%
is what we have now.
Actually,
when he left, we had more than that.
We had more than that, but now we are talking even below 10%.
Below 10%.
So, and he made people think. I remember my dad one day talking about, I cannot cut this tree. I was young. I cannot cut this tree. And I would tell him, why not? This is our tree. He said, no. I have to notify the chief.
And plant two more.
That I'm going to cut this, but I have to show that these are the ones
two of
I'm
the
going
same
to
genes,
plant.
Same what you call species.
Yet that was not in the constitution. It was not even in the law. But it was just a presidential declaration and involvement of people. And he explained every time in his political meetings why it was important to have trees planted, and people took it.
Today in the forestry board.
Yes.
This forestry board right now.
Kenya Forest Service.
Forest something board.
Yes, yes.
We have a miller.
Yes.
The biggest miller in the country is Reply.
Yes, yes.
So I'm told the chairman of the managing director of Reply is in that board.
Yes.
Look at the conflict of interest.
And
look at the conflict of interest.
That never happened.
Literally telling the folks to take care of the sheep.
Yeah, yeah. Keep off. I mean, they will be doing what they want because they are the ones who are supposed to take care of the forest, and they are the ones milling.
Your conflict of interest. Yeah. You're here milling, and you're supposed to regulate the milling itself.
So you regulate yourself.
Yes. How do you regulate yourself other than positively?
So that was it. So in terms of environment, he was really a champion. In terms of uniting the country, he was a champion. But he used development and development activities to unite Kenyans. And therefore Kenyans felt they will participate because it is their cause. For those of you who are joining us, our guest today on Speakers Gallery is Dr. Mugambi. Dr. Mugambi is a lecturer in the University of Nairobi. He is an associate professor of development communication. I cut you short when you're talking about how he united the country. Yes, yes. I have had my own powerful experiences in that. Yes. I was an opposition member of parliament in the 7th parliament. I remember. The only member who served in that term in the opposition in Fort Kenya. Yes. And I sponsored a motion of affirmative action through quota systems to make education accessible. Yes. Tertiary and university education accessible to students from high schools, secondary schools in Northeastern Province. And as I was making the opening remarks for that private member's motion on a Wednesday morning, I remember there were some members of parliament from Northeastern Province who felt they had a certain loyalty to KANU party, and every opportunity they get to frustrate an opposition member of party, they have to do it. Like yourself that time. Like myself that time. Yes. And for them, the overriding consideration for this is that he's going to make a name for him, and we are going to be at risk and come the next election. Yeah. And as I kept on talking about the plight of the students and the youth in Northeastern Province, the late Nicholas Biwott, was all attention. And he kept on listening and hearing the sorry state of education in Northeastern Province, and how only one child makes it to the university every year, maximum 2 children, from the whole province. The entire province. And how in the tertiary colleges we'll be lucky if we can get 25, 30 of them going to medical training college, water college. There was a diploma college also for game, and I can't remember all that. We used to be sent to Mweka. There was this young assistant minister who was full of energy and also wanted to keep on rising on a point of order to interrupt me. And he held him by the hand and pushed him down. I said, don't interrupt him anymore. Yeah. That message was taken very well by the KANU side. Okay. By the time I concluded my own presentation, I moved the motion. There was such a pin drop silence on the other side, and such a sympathy and empathy on the part of the KANU members of parliament, the ministers. The late Olentimama offered to second that motion. Wow, that was good. He seconded it. Must have been convinced. He seconded it. Yes. And Nicholas Biwott sent a message around and said, don't oppose this motion. It's for the development of Kenya. Yes. Many people did not know. They called him Total Man. Yes. He was Total Man in every sense, in the sense of also being patriotic to the country. Yeah. That was, and when the matter was taken to Moi later on, he said, it's a good thing, and he instructed a number of institutions to implement that private member's motion. And one of them was the Kenya Medical Training College. Yes. Another one was
the late Dr. Ishiwani, Professor Ishiwani, who was
Ishiwani.
the Vice Chancellor of Kenyatta
Kenyatta
University, who broke ranks with the Joint Admissions Board to make education accessible to students from marginalized remote areas in the north those days. So he was a nationalist. And he said, I don't care whether he's in the opposition or not. Isn't this taking development to the people? Yes, that is what I want. And he personally shared that with me and told me, I want you to get your development in arrears.
Yeah.
That's the man Moi was.
Yes, yes.
A lot of bad things happened under his reign. For example, for us, we had the Bugala incident, which was
massacre.
terrible.
Yes, yes.
We had the Bola Kartas, which was in Garissa also, Malkamari. And I keep on telling my people, let us investigate to the depth of these things and find out who exactly was responsible for that.
Yes.
Who were they? And what was the role of Moi in that? Remember Moi saying that I'm driving a bus and there are too many passengers in that bus.
The drunkards, smokers, everybody's there. Yes.
There are many other people there. In a nutshell, we opposed him. I opposed him myself right to the end until he left. I also got rigged out.
In that confusion, yes.
In that confusion.
The Mlolongo and all that.
In that confusion, yes.
Yeah.
In that confusion, yes. But the reality of the matter is that he's a man that we can say a lot of good things about.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, there's bound to be other areas where there were excesses.
Yeah.
But in the overall, if you had to put it in one sentence,
overall
picture of Moi, what would you say Moi was?
I will say,
just before you do that, the way he handed over power, the grace, the respect, the gait, under those very difficult circumstances where he was humiliated.
And I was there,
Yes,
actually,
yes,
when
yes,
he was handing over power at Uhuru
yes,
Park.
yes.
And,
But he did it with grace.
All that grace, and he was abused. And I would say this is a true African statesman who cared for his people, who thought about his people, not for present times, even in the future. All the programs he had in place were programs which were meant to help his people that time and to look at the future.
Yeah.
So he's a true African leader who loved his people, who loved his country, and wanted at all times to ensure they were united.
He was a nationalist.
This is a real true nationalist.
Yes.
View,
A Kenyan at heart.
Kenyan at heart.
Not a hyphenated Kenyan.
Not really. a real Kenyan. And he was always worried about issues which will bring division.
Fare thee well,
You
our
remember
former president, yes.
What he talked about, the multi-party. He was worried, and he was actually truly worried. But when the pressure came to bear, he gave in. He said, well, I have told you the challenges you'll have, but have it. So he was a real true statesman.
Yeah.
To that effect.
Yes. Now, I know he's going to be laid to rest on the 12th of this month.
Yes, next week.
At Kabarak, in his own farm. And there will be other. I'm sure there will be a lot that will be said about him. But let's now move to another subject altogether.
All right.
The BBI. Professor, I want you to take as much time and tell us exactly what you think is going to be the final product of this thing right now. I know you can't predict it with certainty.
Yeah, of course.
What do you think is the best thing for us to have in that shell now? Because BBI, for all intents and purposes, is now a shell.
Yeah,
we have to fill in the goods.
Yeah.
But I've given you my opinion where I think somebody like me is looking at it from. Many others are looking at it from different other perspectives. And then a purely ceremonial president who is there for a term of 6 years, who is somebody with an image in the country, a former professor like you, a former diplomat, a former military general, somebody who has a unifying and whose role is going to be limited to receiving ambassadors, a very limited power.
Unifying.
And asking the leader of that, what do you call the party that has the maximum numbers, go and form the government, and you have so many days to form the government. If you don't, then he will ask the one who is next to you in terms of numbers. If you can't get cobbled together that majority, then that's basically exactly like the one of India, like the one of Israel, and many other countries.
Now, I think, first of all, just generally talk about BBI before we come to the
content.
Specific. I think, first of all, BBI is a very good thing. It's a very good thing because it takes us back to independence, where, in my own view, we faltered. All these issues is because we have now, the challenges we have is because we never actually got it right at independence. And you remember, there were all those kinds of proposals at independence, during Legico,
yes,
all that,
yes,
and what happened thereafter, and we ended up in having some kind of
negotiated at Lancaster House.
That,
yeah, I remember.
So it's because we got it wrong, and I think this is the second time, or what we will call in English a second chance, for the country now to look at itself and see the journey for 50 years and be able now to say, this is where we faltered.
Try and get this bearing right.
What is our bearing from here? Having learned the lessons for 50 years, what do we do from here? And this is the best chance.
As a matter of fact, yes.
Yeah, is it 50?
57
years. Yeah.
Almost 60 years.
Yeah, almost 60 years. So 60 years is good time to think about yourselves and see the challenges which have been there. And so the BBI is a good starting point to debate and see what is the best. In terms of, we've just been talking about the late President Moi being a unifying factor and the challenges which came with him. So in the light of those stuff. Yes. So in light of the challenges he had and being a strong man, so what do we learn and how can we improve on our systems? One of the challenges we've had is how to keep the country united. How do we make Kenyans feel that they are Kenyans? You've just talked about how people in northern Kenya will come to Nairobi and say they have come to Kenya.
They're going to Kenya. Or
they are going to Kenya. Yes. That is a feeling, because there were no roads, there was no water, there were no health services, and yet they will know that in other parts of Kenya, everything was working. So that feeling of being isolated,
alienated,
and marginalized and alienated, that is a big challenge. You can't be united with other parts of the country when you know what is happening there is not what is happening. So that is one. Two, marginalization in terms of positions in government, both at the political level and at the bureaucratic level. During Moi's time, you will have somebody from Coast being head of civil service. You will have Akisi. Nyachai was powerful Yugi. And so
General Mohammed
feeling
from our area,
yes,
and Haji, of course, was the chairman of all pieces.
So you see that feeling. So in terms of bureaucracy, senior civil servants, because people know and see, because those positions are actually resources. And so when they are distributed fairly and people can see them in their villages, they have
a feeling of ownership.
So how do we put those people together? BBI talks about resources and how they should be distributed. Right now, even with the county system, there is still a feeling that the 85%, which remains at the national level, is still not distributed fairly. So
they have coffee roads, they have tea roads. Now they have started the Mau roads.
It is 85%. So how do we?
I don't know what is the counterpart of Mau that you can. In your case, you would say maybe I don't know what. What would you say? Chingoro roads.
Perhaps Chingoro roads or Sungusungu roads. We also have Sungusungu.
So what do we say in our side? Also, we say bandits roads.
Bandit roads. Bandit roads.
Or shifter roads.
Shifter roads, perhaps. So how do we put all these together to ensure we have one unified system? I think that is the crux of the matter. If you look at a pure parliamentary system, that is where you started, which you support. I think there is always a feeling among some parts of the country that a pure parliamentary system, as is, right now, if it was to take effect, will favor certain areas which have or do not have populations like other areas, for example, northern Kenya, or in places like Lamu County, where you have, you know, an MP coming with 5,000, you know. But look at North Horr.
Maybe even 10, yeah.
Yeah, look at North Horr.
And the size of it.
And the size.
Which is bigger than the
Western
Nyanza and Western put together.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So we have to look at situations where we consider both the land mass and the population.
And the infrastructure.
And the infrastructure. And again, remembering that in those areas like North Horr, the infrastructure is in pathetic state.
It's not there. It doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. So while saying that you serve, you know, the argument has always been that you bring services to serve populations, to serve an individual, but not to serve, you know, large tracts of land or
wild
areas or wild animals for that matter.
Or the cows and camels that we have there.
The counter argument has always been that you must be able to use roads to reach those people wherever they are.
And wherever they are entitled to the rights like any other Kenyan.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So you have to have roads to reach those people.
No, the manner in which it was used, the criteria that was used at independence was an exceptionally good thing. I mean, it was very good.
Yeah.
Demographics, you know, expanse of land, population, infrastructure available, all that. Community interest.
Yes.
Community interest, more than anything else.
Very important.
Yes.
So I think, and that is how we seem to be going backwards to learn from history, that all those factors are very important when we are coming with a system which will help the country move forward, having learned all the experiences of the past. So, do we go parliamentary system? Do we do proportional representation? Do we have mixed?
The constituencies as they are right now, and bring in certain mixed, you know, we call it mixed member.
Mixed member.
And choose a few now, like 50 or 40 seats through that population quota.
I think the mixed member, for me, will do good. This is why. Because the 290 constituencies which exist will continue voting and existing as they are.
On a first-past system.
Yes, as they are. Then have
another 40
or 50. You know, call them 40, 50, 60, according to how we agree.
Yes.
Then these will be
on party strength.
Party strength.
Yes. Nationally.
Yes, nationally. Yes. So if you have, for example,
10% of the overall vote, which because they're going to be this person has a choice to vote as a member of parliament somebody who is on ODM, but the other side he might want to vote for Jubilee.
Because again, remember,
because one is an individual, and that individual loyalty is there, but here is a party.
And that is very important in most areas. Yes. I mean, I come from Kisii.
Yes.
We, more often than not, vote for individuals.
Yes.
Because we want workers who will work for us.
Yes.
So in one instance, I'll vote for Mohammed.
Yes.
And because he's a worker.
And the party of choice.
But you know, he's in, for example,
in another party that you're not
Kenya, for example, whatever it is.
Yeah, you don't even care about.
Yeah, I'm not, but
I only care about the individual. Yes.
But now I think that the party which carries the ideals and which is going to serve
and the prime minister that you want to see
is so and so.
Yes.
So I am going to vote for party X.
Yes.
But here I voted for Y.
Yes.
Who is not in party X.
Absolutely.
And then have this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Voted, and then the party now will be mandated to have or to feel, and it may not only be one
it
party.
Will have support all over the country.
Support. Yeah, of course.
So if it has to attend to the needs of the whole country.
And I think this mixed member presentation will do one other thing. It will improve party democracy in the country.
And party loyalty.
Party discipline. And party loyalty will come in. Yeah. Because as
the parties will be professional parties.
And very strong parties. And you know, like the attendance results of having very strong parties and very vibrant party democracy within parties, which we don't have. We have been having a big
You put
problem.
it very well, Professor.
Yes.
Put it very, very well, Professor Mugambi. Yes. My final question on that.
Yes.
My final question. which you can also put in your own parting
Perspective,
shots and
yes.
parting thoughts.
Yes.
We are now trying to move from one region to the other region to popularize the need for Kenyans to internalize the BBI concept and think loud and have too many town halls and everything
Yes,
else so
yes.
that their views can be collected.
Okay. And collected.
And collected.
Yes.
But within that, you have the Tanga team, you have the Keleweke team, you have the rest of us who do not belong to any of those. But you basically belong to a concept, and you either feel strongly against BBI or strongly for BBI. But suddenly the Tanga team, which opposed BBI initially, comes on board and says they want to be part of BBI. The presumption on many other areas is that they are coming to rock the boat. They are spoilers in these meetings. I was there in Kitui myself.
Oh, yeah.
The Tanga team insisted on being given a special seat in the front. For a while, they were welcomed by everybody, including Ngilu. You give her credit for that. But later on, the feeling in many of those people who were there was that they did not come to participate, they came to
rock or spoil the meeting.
To spoil the meeting, to mess up the meeting. And that's why you had this, throw them out and other words which were not quite civil in their own rights. Going forward, how do you think Tanga should behave in terms of the inputs they want to bring into this BBI? You think these two teams, or rather the three teams or the four teams of those many of us, which is the bulk of the country,
yes,
who feel that BBI is another opportunity for us to redo our constitution and change a good number of things.
Do things, yes.
A good number of things can have an opportunity to engage in a meaningful discussions and debates and inputs from all over, and the feeling that Tanga wants to. How do you go forward from this?
I think the way forward.
If we have to go forward,
the way forward is one. The handshake gave birth to BBI. The principals who are in charge of BBI is the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, and former Prime Minister and opposition leader, Raila Odinga.
Yeah.
They must focus on BBI and give us a situation in Kenya which gives hope for generations to come. How do you do that? The President must now, more than ever before, show leadership.
Come out and say this is how things are going to be.
He must come out and show that this is how I envisage this process to move forward, and this is what and how I expect all members of my party to behave
conduct themselves
and conduct themselves in the wake of BBI meetings and town hall meetings and the product of those meetings. Because at the end of the day, we are going to have a document which shall be part and parcel of our lives, which shall be
put to referendum.
Yes.
To question.
To put question, then there will be politics, then we will vote for it. But the way forward, and I know the President listens, and he has listened to us, and he has been listening to other people, is to ensure his house is on order, and to ensure there is one voice, there is unity of purpose, because I believe he's not doing this for himself, he's doing this for the
country.
And so he must step out and be very firm and say, I don't want divergent noises from Team A, Team B, Tanga, and wherever they are. We must be focused on this thing. If you do not want, you wait for it and you will oppose it at the right time.
Vote against it.
Vote against it. But for now, we are only collecting views on the document which we have, which you will read later and decide whether you want to oppose it or support it. But for now, leave us to do the process And I know the President, in his own wisdom, will do that in the coming weeks.
Professor, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you. I have known you for a while now, and it's always fascinating to share some of these opinions with you, and I'm sure we'll have many more sessions on Speakers Gallery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Viewers, we have come to the end of the show, and until next time we meet, have a good night.